You're listening to MRP, the Metal Robot Podcast.
Metal sites are bad at journalism. At least that's the general consensus based off of this week's events, where Blabbermouth and Metal Injection did one dirty on a fellow metal YouTuber.
Blabbermouth publishes another story where they interviewed Angel Ripper and pretty much asked the same questions that I had asked. It's pretty much a rewrite of the original interview, or at the very least, they plagiarized the questions that I asked and asked the exact same questions all over again.
That is the voice of Pedro from the YouTube channel A&P Reacts, and his reaction to, I couldn't help it, and his reaction to Blabbermouth rehashing his interview with Angel Ripper. What? Blabbermouth did that? Are you sure? Yes, I am. But before we get to that, I need to tell you who A&P Reacts is. If you didn't know already, A&P Reacts is Pedro and his son Antonio, the A in A&P Reacts, reacting to metal music videos. That's more or less what happens there, but it also serves as a chance, the channel serves as a chance for Pedro to review new releases in the metal community and, to the point of this story, interview metal bands and metal musicians. And he's talked to a lot of bands in that vein as well, including one Angel Ripper of the German metal band Sodom back in October. And this is where we find out that Blabbermouth and Metal Injection did one dirty. So for context, Pedro did an interview with Angel Ripper back in October to talk about the 40 Years at War compilation album that Sodom was putting out. Blabbermouth ended up picking up that video because of one specific part in the video where they talked about a potential Big Four of German thrash metal tour. Fast forward to this past week. According to Pedro, Blabbermouth recycled Pedro's interview with Angel Ripper and tried to pass it off as their own. Now, at first, Pedro wasn't sure if they actually copied and pasted a transcription of Pedro's video into their website and just created that as if it was their own. But Steamhammer Records, apparently, who is the record company that Sodom is under, did confirm that an interview with Angel Ripper and Blabbermouth did take place, and it was not a direct copy of the video's transcription. But that being said, Pedro still claims that basically what happened is they took the questions that he asked about a possible Big Four of German thrash tour and just asked them again. And Pedro says he knows this because he claims that of all the interviewers that Angel Ripper talked to promoting 40 Years at War, Pedro was the first person to even bring up the possibility of a Big Four of German thrash tour.
He was doing promotion for this album for months. Not a single person under this blue sky that we live asked those questions until I asked those questions.
But it gets one worse, because with that new Blabbermouth interview, Metal Injection comes into the picture. They never even talked about the possibility of this question when A&P Reacts were being talked about, but instead, when Blabbermouth ended up doing their interview of the subject, that is when Metal Injection got involved and they shared that interview and not the one that the question originally came from, which is where a lot of the conversation is coming from. And thus, credit was not given to A&P Reacts for that specific part of the interview. Pedro did clarify, he knows he does not own questions. It's more about the integrity behind it as an interviewer when it comes to reusing questions and recycling questions that Angel Ripper had already answered in the past, by the way, and trying to pass them off as if you came up with that on your own, even though you knew already that that question was already asked by another person. Now, Metal Injection, for their part, has responded to Pedro on Twitter, defending themselves, saying that they were quoting the Blabbermouth interview directly. Then, a few days later, Blabbermouth doubled down on their interview as, quote, the same question/subject addressed in two separate interviews, which more or less confirmed what Pedro was thinking in the first place.
I never accused them in public or otherwise of completely plagiarizing my interview. That's not what I accused them of. I accused them of what I just said, lazy journalism at best.
And to clarify, because I know there's going to be a bit of contradiction and possible misunderstanding of the controversy, Pedro is not saying that he has a problem with these sites using him as a source, so long as they give proper credit.
Blabbermouth has quoted interviews that I have done in the past plenty of times. I've never had an issue with that, and I don't have an issue with that. But if you're quoting somebody's work, you have to reference who you're quoting.
And he's not wrong with that. I know this for a fact. A lot of metal news media sites will see an article or an interview on another site, another big site in their sector, and they will pull a direct quote from that article and then give credit to that article, which is not the biggest problem so long as that article was the original source. While it doesn't happen all of the time, and while I'm not saying that every single news writer for every single one of these sites is culpable with this, it happens enough that you start to question whether or not these sites should be hiring news writers to at least have a basic knowledge of basic journalism, or even better, someone who has an actual journalism diploma or degree at most. Or shit, even do basic journalism training before you even hire these guys on, or give them basic knowledge of what they should do in these cases. Now, I did the full interview with Pedro earlier this week. It's about 30 minutes long. You can find the full thing on the Metal Robot Reviews YouTube channel, linked down in the podcast description. But I think it's important to really note here that the whole problem here is that these guys are not held accountable for this type of, I will say it, lazy journalism. I am not trying to call people out here, and I know not everybody is responsible for this. I mean, shit. Like, I've even done this myself. But I think there's a lot less need to scrutinize a young, dumb podcaster with stupid jokes on the internet compared to a major metal news site that really should fucking know better.
These guys should be held to higher standards. They're not.
You just listened to MRP, the Metal Robot Podcast.